The Great Commission tells us our job is to teach and preach the gospel to all mankind, and that God will be there and He will provide and He will share. He will make sure that we have everything that we need. Maybe not everything we want, but we will have everything that we need.
Hello, friends. This is Susan Shull, your host for the Clean Heart Club podcast. I'm a farm wife, mom, Grammy, holy yoga teacher, and Christian life coach. Clean Heart Club is the place for you if you want to learn to live in abundance and walk in freedom to be 100% your true self. I can't wait to share with you guided meditations and sacred story interviews with some of my favorite people. Wherever you are on your path, I'm excited to join hands as we allow our loving Heavenly Father to clean up our hearts and we start living the adventure of our lives with joy and gratitude. This is going to be fun. Hello, Clean Heart Club listeners. It is so good to be back with you today and to introduce you to yet another special guest. I'm feeling like, especially today, that I am so blessed because I get to find interesting people in the world and then ask them to be on this show and then pick their brains for my own benefit and for yours. And I think you're going to love our guest today. He has lived quite an interesting life and done it as a believer. So I'm excited to introduce you to Joe Fatheree. I hope I said your last name right. I should have asked you.
Yeah, you
for
did
sure.
a good job. Kudos.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for
How are you
joining
doing,
us on the
Susan?
Clean Heart Club.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be on. Look forward to a good conversation today.
And well, me too. So the listeners will know right before we got on here, Joe told me that this is kind of his full-time gig now. Lots of podcasts, lots of interviews and all that. And I know you live in a town or a community about the same size as me. So a small rural type area. Well, tell us about you and then how in the world you found yourself in the situation that you're in now.
Well, thank you. I grew up in metropolitan Xenia, Illinois, a town of about 450 people, and it was a great place. I grew up in a time when, as a kid, you got a bike, you could travel anywhere on the earth that you wanted to have. Now, granted, my best friend Kevin and I, as we rode our bikes, our chain fell off about every 12 feet, so we didn't get very far. But in our mind's eye, we did, and but there was no grass in my yard or his yard because we had everybody in the community down playing baseball, basketball, wiffle ball, whatever, and you just learned a lot about how to work with people, how not to work with people, and it was a great place to grow up. And I went to college and decided to become an educator. Met my wife at Eastern Illinois University and just started teaching in Effingham, taught there for about 35 years. First part of my career was teaching students who struggle with reading. And when I started, I didn't understand the gift that God had given me. And I really got to discover about how some people really want to learn and they struggle with it. And it's not easy. And so it became my task to try to figure that out. And with that, yes, go ahead.
So well, first of all, I want to remind the listeners that the Kevin that Joe's talking about, you guys know because Kevin's been on our show twice and people have loved his episodes. So it's the same Kevin.
He's twice as good as I am. So I understand. So,
and then the second thing, I taught eighth grade, mainly eighth grade language arts. And so I know a little bit about working with struggling readers. What age group were you working with?
I had high school kids, and most of them, I mean, they had a lot of them at the time had reading levels down to second grade. Not all of them, but it's tough when you're a high school kid and that's where you're at, and you don't feel like you can pick things up, and so it just gets easier to spend less time paying attention at school than what you maybe need to pour into things. But I understand from the kids' side now that hasn't helped me all these years, so why would I do it now? And so that was the challenge, was how do you unlock the mysteries of learning for those kids and really empower them. I remember my first year vividly. I'd been my first year in Effingham. I was teaching that class, and I was just going nowhere. I mean, I thought every kid in the country, and this will shock your listeners, but I thought everybody loved diagramming sentences. You have diagramming sentence clubs after school. That's what you do on the weekends, and
Turns out.
turns out that's not the case. But when you go to college, that's what they teach you is textbook worksheets and all these things. And not that there's not some um, benefits behind them, but for the average kid and for the kid that struggles, it's just not their gig. And I remember after about 6 months sitting in class, and I told my wife, I said, if I don't get this figured out, I said, I'm done. I said, I'm wasting their time. I'm not good at what I'm doing. And I came into a class and I talked to the kids, and they said, well, Mr. F, you don't get it. They said, we go from dummy math to dummy science to dummy history to dummy English. And honestly, you're an idiot for thinking you can teach us anything.
Oh,
And I thought, man, wow, these kids are 15 and they give up on life. And I had to go home and take a long look in the mirror. And in year two, I figured out it wasn't their problem, it was mine. I needed to figure out what to do,
so
you
did you
know? And
find, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but did you
no, I just
find,
flipped my mode of teaching. I found ways to engage kids in the learning process. And so my kids, their scores went up, their attendance went up, the discipline issues went down. And it's just because somebody showed they cared. Somebody heard them and said, hey, this isn't working. You got to try something different. I'm desperate for this. I wasn't great at it when I first started. I was better at it when I ended, but I became on a quest to be a lifelong learner and to figure out how do you unlock those mysteries, and that really opened a lot of doors from that. So I think you had a question, and then we can go on. But
yeah, I was going to say, in my experience, it was not an intelligence problem. These kids are so smart. They just learn differently, and you had to figure out how to interest them enough to make them brave enough to be willing to try something new.
well,
So
that was
anyway,
it. I came in, I got rid of all my textbooks. I still had mine, but I told them, I said, I'm done, and we're going to listen to music. And they came in and they knew every song on the planet. They knew every artist. They knew the stories behind them. And I'm like, well, why don't you write some of your own songs? And they would start working on that a little bit. And I said, I'm going to introduce you to a few of my favorite hip hop artists, Edgar Allan Poe, Robert Frost, Browning, Keats. And they're like, wow, these guys are awesome. Well, they never heard that these were famous literary people, and they didn't need to know. They just need to know the stories. And so they would write, and they're like, this doesn't make sense. And I'm like, let's try a period, or let's do this. And the more they built confidence, the better they got. And I started learning what worked and what didn't work. And we could still have really high standards, and we could still have a highly disciplined classroom, but we stopped the sentence diagramming club in year one. It did not make it to year two, to everybody's happiness. And then I went on, taught history for a while, and met Craig Linval from Teutopolis, and he and I started on a journey together where we co-taught a film class. We had one of the world's largest student-operated film festivals run our classes, and on the weekends, he and I would go out and make documentary films together. So we had 3 films showing 100 million homes nationwide on PBS, MLB, Doc Channel, I think several others. I started the CEO program that is out there and about, I think it's in 350 high schools across the country.
I actually
And
have a
I
granddaughter
actually
in it
start.
right now. I have a
Well, good. I
granddaughter
started
in
that
it
my first
right
year at
now.
Oakland High School in Oakland, Illinois. I got asked to teach an economics class. I had another horrible textbook, and this was prior to the internet. And so I had kids go out and start building businesses on their own, and it was a game changer for the class. And then I left, went to Effingham, and about 11 years later, an opportunity came back to start that program with a business leader in Effingham, Jack Schultz. We went out and raised all the startup capital and seeded a board. And um, I was asked to teach the initial class, and I thought all I was going to do was end up raising funding for it and we needed somebody to really take it. And we needed two people. We needed somebody on the teacher side to work with business leaders, and they to work with us to get the board and all the operation stuff working. And that's where I went. And we encouraged them to hire Craig, and he took it to new heights and did incredible things with it. And he did the teaching side of it. And then after about 3 or 4 years of that, I stepped out and started doing other things, and was really blessed in my life. I was named Illinois Teacher of the Year in '07, the NEA's top teacher in the nation in 2009, and one of the top teachers in the world, the top 10 teachers in the world in 2016 by the Varkey Foundation. And it opened a myriad of new doors for me. God is got a great sense of humor, because he keeps opening the doors. And sometimes I don't know why I'm in them, other than his message to me is, I just ask you to be here. You don't need to know. And and we'll get into all this, I know, a little bit, but I started working with a lot of groups. I was one of the founding fathers of Advance Illinois with Governor Edgar and Bill Daley. So it's an ed policy group in Illinois. Was one of the founders of the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. I worked with them as a director of strategic projects while I taught full time, which was great because I had access to all these amazing people on the outside. My kind of one thing was, I'll do this if you help my kids. And so my kids got a benefit from this. And then right before COVID happened, I started to go to the U of I to get my doctorate, which I just passed my final exam last
Congratulations.
week. Got my dissertation done. So my field of study is looking at the synthetic relationships that form between AI systems and children. And it's been quite the journey. And I didn't expect any of this when I started.
Wow. Okay. So you mentioned documentaries, and I feel like we shouldn't fly past that. What documentaries did you make with Craig?
The first one we did together was called A Time for Honor, and it was about the Vietnam War. And we interviewed 5 people from Central Illinois, and one was a nurse who volunteered to go to war to be with her husband, who was drafted. One was a guy who was at the Battle of Quezon San. Another one was a local man he had been in country about a week, and he was shot in 7 different spots in his body. And then the last one would have been, if you've seen the movie Forrest Gump, the Congressional Medal of Honor recipient Samuel Davis, who was from Flat Rock, Illinois at the time. We interviewed him. And then we that showed in 100 million homes, got I got a Mid American Emmy Award for Best Documentary for that. And then we did one on a disabled mountain climber named Kyle Packer. He crawled up base camp of Everest on his knees in 1998. He had cerebral palsy.
Oh my
And
word.
Craig and I spent 3 summers out in the mountains with him filming. Unfortunately, we lost both of those guys here in the last few years. And we got 2 Mid-American Emmys for that one for producing and writing. And then we did another film together called Cobb Field, and it was on minor league baseball out in Billings, Montana. And we had other ones we were going to do. We want to do one on coal mining. We want to do one on whaling towns. We had a list of them. And life just got busy, and CEO kicked off for Craig, and I started doing other things where I was working on animation projects and nonprofit things. And it just, but we'll see each other in heaven someday, and we'll get a chance to make more when we get there. So,
And the rest of us can watch them. Okay, so were your students involved in these projects, or was this just the two of you?
no, Craig had been making them before. He's quite the human. He actually was one of them that just took me under his wing and showed me a lot of things. And that was, I think, one of the keys to my success was constantly looking for mentors that God would place in my life. And he definitely had a profound place, very much like my kindergarten teacher, Miss Stanley. But we started making films together first, and we were both doing filmmaking classes. And he was doing it at Teutopolis, and I was doing it at Effingham, and we're like 5 miles apart, fighting for the same resources. Got great kids. So he came over. We talked to both of our superintendents. Boards agreed. Which crosstown rivals doesn't always happen. And I was glad they saw the value in it, because we had 7 magic years together where our kids came and did just we had at one time MediaCom gave us 750,000 televisions in the Midwest. We had filmmakers from all different parts of the earth come and hang out in Effingham. We used to sell out the Hart Theater in Effingham like 10 minutes time. Then we went to the EPC and they were great. We worked with them. And it was, when I went back to my writing piece, I often tell people, how many of you have, sell out 1,500 seats to see your kids' homework? Because that's what we did. And it really mattered. Writing mattered for our kids because we put their homework in places where it would matter. That's why CEO is successful, is because we take kids' life interest and we don't tell them, hey, you got to wait till you're 37 to get started. You're 17. Yeah, go for it. Let's help you out. Let's bring you in, let people mentor you and bring you along. And so those life pieces matter. And that's what part of my teaching's always been.
Wow. Okay, so this is totally a personal question, but we have another granddaughter who is a Golden Apple Award winner, and she's studying to be a teacher now. And she's going to be a fabulous teacher. She already is. She's been teaching since she was a little girl. But I wonder I've been out of the field with kids now for many years. What advice would you give a young teacher today?
Find your passion. I didn't understand when I started what mine was. I really wanted to go to law school. I just never found my way there. And what I found out, my passion in life was helping people. And that can move from job to job. Jobs are going to change a lot in the next few years with AI. But if she finds her passion, and for mine was unlocking, helping, not for me, but helping students unlock the barriers that were in their learning pathways. That could be a lot of things. It could be a learning disability. It could be poverty. It could be struggling with focus, confidence. It could be overconfidence. Could be a lot of things. And so helping them find their passion and unlock those mysteries for them and finding, and helping kids create their toolbox for success. That was something that I always wanted to be able to do, help them be able to identify what tools they needed, when they needed them, and how they need to be utilized. And then the last thing is, we're all beneficiaries of people who have helped us out. I'm a Christian because I had a couple that would walk down the road to my mom and dad's house and invited me to church when I was a little boy. There's a lot of people in my life that I owe a great deal of thanks to. And so make sure that you thank people when you get the opportunity to thank them. Let those know that that you love them. And then the last piece is help elevate others with no particular rewards or anything coming back in mind. That's part of our job. And if you do those things, you're going to find happiness in life. And I think the last piece on this is, and I hate it because I think I used to do it too, apologize for being a teacher. You're a teacher. And very, very few occupations come with the ability to watch a whole community come to life. And a lot of the kids that I had back when I first started, they're corporate lawyers. I've had them working with the White House. I've had them, looking at high end medical jobs and farmers and ministers. They do all of these things. And I've watched society grow through them. And I got to be a small piece of that. And so that's what I tell students, to never apologize for it. But if you're hungry, humble, and smart, you're going to go a long way in life.
No matter what field you're in.
Hey, that's right.
For sure. Yes, there's nothing quite like having this. Just happened to me recently. We were at a community event, and a man who I hadn't seen since he graduated from 8th grade came up and gave me a hug and thanked me and reminded me of something silly we used to do in the classroom. And it's just so fun to see them out in the wide world contributing to society. I totally get that. So good.
Oh, it is unreal. And I can't begin to tell you the number of times my wife and I have been at a restaurant and we get ready to go pay, and some former student has snuck in and bought dinner for us. And thank you for all those of you guys who have done it. It was so kind. It wasn't expected, but I tell you what, it just you get that because you teach. You get respect, and You get respect if you give respect, I guess is what I should say. There are those that out there that don't, and just like every other profession, there are some that it might not be your gig. You might want to go do something else. Doesn't mean that there isn't a place for you to do something else, but we need people who are really sold out for kids and understand that a lot of kids come with a lot of struggles, and our job as educators is to help them figure out how to overcome them without being judgmental on it.
Yeah, it's a very noble profession. Okay, so you taught for 35 years. You won all these awards, and God has put you in rooms that you never anticipated being in.
Well, like I've always had an interest in all kinds of things, and I'm a avid reader, and and I'll just kind of give you an example where I'm at right now with artificial intelligence. It's always been on my radar or something to learn, but whenever I started noticing with students, I'll kind of back up a little bit a few years ago, that when we do in-depth conversations about filmmaking, that when I'd show clips of stuff, the kids, when I first started doing this, they were immediately connected. We had all kinds of deep conversations. And this is prior to cell phones. There's some really good books out there, Anxious Generation, Disengaged Teen, that talk about just how some of the technology is reprogramming the plasticity in our kids' brains. And I started noticing probably my last 5 years of teaching, the conversations I was having with my students were not the same ones I used to have. Great kids, same wonderful, brilliant kids, but I started noticing the impact tech was having on the kids because they were connected all the time. We did an experiment in my class one day where I just asked the kids, I said, "You're not going to get in trouble." But one of the big challenges was them keeping their cell phones not on them. So it's their masters at hiding them and doing things that, right now we're looking at in Illinois is a statewide ban. A lot of states are looking at this. Governor Pritzker's
Wow.
pushing it pretty hard. And, and I'm not here to argue one side or the other, but I will say that in 1 hour in class, my co-teacher asked, we put all of, at the time, the hottest social media platforms out there. So it'd have been Facebook, Snapchat, um, Instagram, text messaging, whatever. We had several of them up on the board. And I just told the kids, I said, here's what we're working on for the next bit. Put your cell phone on your desk. Every time you get a notification, I want you to get up and just put a tally mark on the board for the one that you got. So if you get one Instagram, just mark it up there. And they kind of thought I was playing them. I said, I am not the phone police. All right. This is an experiment we're doing in class. We're going to have a conversation about
I'm
it.
not going to call your mom.
That's right. I'm not calling your mom. We're not calling the office. We're just going through this right now because I want you to see what I'm seeing. In an hour, we had 198 interruptions in an hour, and probably a little bit less than an hour. And what was interesting was that was only about half of the class. So we had the popular kids and the kids who felt they were not popular. And so they hardly got up at all. And I asked the kids after we got done, we had a deep conversation about this. And the kids said, "Well, Mr. Fatheree, I'm not popular enough to have anybody ever, they don't like me." And I had one girl tell me, she said, "Yeah, and I think my boyfriend doesn't love me anymore because I texted him and he didn't text me back."
Wow.
And in her mind's eye, in their mind's eye, that's what popularity is. And it gets easy to kind of laugh at these things. But if we learned anything from COVID, life is precious and love matters. And we're going to find a way to connect one way or another. And this is where I get very deeply into where my research is right now. And we're seeing a lot of people turn to these synthetic relationships with artificial intelligence. And in a synthetic relationship, like in our relationship right now, one of the things that works is reciprocity. So the more you talk and I talk, and we find out that we're trusting and worthy, we keep coming back, we get deeper and deeper in those conversations. And social media, sort of, but AI, conversational AI, you get what I call synthetic reciprocity. So you believe as a human that the other side is talking and caring about you, but it's not. It's a program. But for people who don't understand that or don't have anybody, they don't really care. They just know somebody is listening to me. And I'll answer your question you asked me a couple minutes ago here in a second. But there was a video on the internet a couple weeks ago about a monkey that had been kicked out of its tribe by its mom.
I
And
saw that.
okay, yeah. And so the way the zookeepers found to give the monkey something to connect with was to give it a stuffed animal monkey. Well, you might remember, Susan, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a research scientist by the name of Harry Harlow. He did exactly these experiments. And they pulled young infant monkeys away from their mother monkey, and they gave them a monkey as a wireframe. And you got your followers can look this up on the internet, Harry Harlow, and it was wrapped with terry cloth. It looked really nothing like a monkey, but they could feed it and everything. And they found out that these juvenile monkeys immediately attached to this terry cloth monkey. It was a synthetic relationship. And Harry Harlow had thought, matter of fact, he made the statement that we can train the monkeys as well. We can be as good as mothers as the real physical mothers are. He was all over this. And then they
Wow.
found out that that was wrong because the monkeys were self mutilating themselves. They were isolated. And even when they put them out back into systems, they could not gather again. And so this just brought this back to life. I'm like, this is Harry Harlow's experiment right here. And in the human terms, it's the experiment we're doing right now on this earth where people are doing this. This truly could be the last generation of children on earth, and I don't say this lightly, the last generation of children on earth that understand human relationships as you and I do. That may never
What?
exist again in humanity. And so
What
when
in the
you talk
world?
about being in a room, I went from being a high school teacher to learning everything that I could learn about AI, finding every single researcher that I could talk with that worked in an array of different venues. I spent the last 5 to 7 years on this, digging in at a very deep level. So I was I was asked in 2019 to serve on the Institute for Ethical AI and Education in the United Kingdom. So I was the sole American on that, and I worked with members of parliament, high-level developers, and academics to create one of the first model codes of ethics for AI and ed. I had the privilege this past summer of working with HP Computers and T4 Education as one of 100 global experts to work on AI research, developing an AI policy framework that's out right now. And I'm on my second governor appointed AI task force for the state of Illinois. And I work in a lot of spaces like that. I work with school districts. You know, my number one thing is I've got 5 selfish reasons that I'm on these committees, and it's my grandkids. I want to make sure that the world they're being born into, that they have an opportunity for hope and relationships and doing things outside and getting dirty and messing things up. There's a whole lot of great attributes that go along with AI. So I want to make sure that I say that. But we can do in parallel, we can look at the good, like discovering AIs that discover breast cancer in women 5 years earlier, that are developing new agricultural practices, you know, that are dealing with global warming. I'm not gonna make a list a mile long, but if we got issues, we also got to call those out. And this generation is not old enough, and what they're getting is what they're inheriting from us. And so I've been in a lot of situations like that over the last probably 20 or 30 years. And God, each one of those situations, they were smaller at first. And, you know, you mess up, you get better, you go find help, you realize you're not the smartest person in the room, you go find people who are, and they help point you along. And slowly over time, I've just grown into a lot of different spaces. I'm doing a lot of work right now in the nuclear industry. We're trying to help looking at nuclear energy and how we would do things in those spaces, and are those good things to do, and all kinds of spaces. And so it's just an opportunity to continue down this journey as a lifelong learner, and also to bring other people along and to help elevate them when the opportunity exists.
Okay, so I feel like I need to pause and say, what in the world are you doing on my podcast? Thank you.
I'm enjoying my time with a really just beautiful Christian person. I'm enjoying my
I
day. So
really
thanks for having me.
appreciate you. I mean, I knew you were a big deal in the world. Everybody's a big deal in the world, but you're a
Yeah,
really big
I would
deal in the
say.
world. So I appreciate your taking the time to to share with us. So I'm thinking about my sweet younger. I have some older grandkids, as you know, from what I've already said, but I have younger ones too. What can we do as parents and grandparents to, is protect the right word? Educate?
Well, yeah, I think we want to get away from this is not Chicken Little and the sky is falling, and it's not helicopter parents or lawnmower parents or whatever the terminology is today. But I think it is understanding you have an obligation to your kids to help prepare them. That doesn't mean that you do everything for them. But the first thing I would tell you is get educated. And a couple of things that I would consider doing is for young parents and grandparents, I would read The Anxious Generation. It is a really good book, and it does an incredible job of discussing how cell phones are and social media are actually rewiring the brains of your kids. You can see I've got one sitting on my shelf back behind me, and I spent a lot of time in neuroscience, and we just want to make sure that we understand what are healthy habits. I grew up in the generation of the magic Saturday morning where for 4 hours you could get lost in cartoons. Well, now you can't get away from the technology. It's ubiquitous. It goes with you everywhere. And the newer technology is reaching out to you. Like there's an application out there called Replica, and you can download it on your phone. And it's an AI, and you can download male or female avatar. You can pick your ethnicity. You can do hairstyling, whatever. So I chose, when I was doing my research, a young African American male because I was wanting to see if a young African American male who was disenfranchised and was struggling with friends and life, if he went to an AI that had a black avatar, would he be actually learning from a black man? Or would it be from a programmer, probably my age and probably my race? And that's exactly what I found out. It knew nothing about African American culture.
Wow.
And it's important. Your culture is important. And so the scarier thing is it will contact you. It'll send you text. It'll reach back out to you, or for an upcharge, it will call you. And you can decide whether you want to be a friend or having a romantic relationship with it. And I found there's a in my research and my lit review, a guy, a highly educated individual, computer programmer. He just married his, and people look at me like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And they said, "Why would somebody do this?" And I said, "I can tell you exactly who this kid is. This is a kid who sits by himself at lunch at school, who has no friends, that nobody listens to, that everybody makes fun of, and love matters, and we're going to find some way to feel loved." And I think, so before everybody starts pointing fingers, what we need to point them back at ourselves. What am I doing to make that person feel valued? I think it's really incredible that important that we go do that. I mean, that's what Jesus asked us to do, is to love God and to love our neighbors, like we love ourselves. And we don't do that now. We do it very much like Obadiah, where Obadiah went to Elijah and said, "Hey, Elijah, haven't you heard? I've hidden 50 prophets in 2 caves, so I've got 100 out there." And Elijah's like, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to Mount Carmel. This is what I'm doing. God didn't call us to hide in caves." And so I think that's where the church has gone. And it's not bad that we go to church, not glad that our church has great things and activities, but Jesus said, "You're the church." And so the church is supposed to go out, and we're supposed to go out and do those things. The other thing that I would do is read The Disengaged Teen.
Okay.
Would be another really good book for somebody to pick up to see where kids are struggling in school and why. And it may not, if your kid is struggling, it may not be just because they want to be. There may be some things going on that maybe you ought to look at. I think it'd be a good place for you to start. And then I think after you get educated in AI a little bit, I would go to places where there are trustworthy people, and I would learn about it. And then I would set parameters up for how it's being used and what are the good ways. So, one of the things that we've talked about in research is there are a lot of good uses for AI. And like I said, uh, there came out a couple of years ago with one that can discover breast cancer in women 5 years earlier. What an absolute blessing. Nobody's going to argue the point of that being a good thing.
Right.
But, we hear all the time about kids cheating on papers, and they do. But they've been cheating with spiral notebooks and all kinds of stuff, so that's not necessarily the thing. It may be more rampant today. It may not be. I know it's been going on a long time. The thing I'm concerned about is cognitive offloading, where that we let a student use the AI in the wrong order, and he or she thinks, almost like the synthetic reciprocity, they think, hey, what I'm doing is mine. It is not yours, it's the AI's. And so there was a great MIT study on some of that this past summer. And where I think people can figure out at is, how do I do my piece? How do I fail? Failure is an inherent part, and it's a critical part of the learning process. And once I learned that as a teacher and how I could convey that to my kids, and we'll find success, but if you can't deal with failure, you're going to have a hard time living, because it comes every day. And so helping them figure that out. But for a lot of our kids, they just see homework as getting through school. They don't see it as the value of learning. And that's where I think we've got to restructure and repaint what it looks like. And we've got to do that in our own lives as adults. But I think there's a lot of goodness coming, but I think there's also job displacement. Um, there's ethical pieces out there. There's a highly sexualized. There are a couple of highly sex. I'm not even going to give names to them because I don't want people looking them up. But
Yeah.
there are highly sexualized bots. So the pornography industry is going to go wild over those things. And so you've got to have good moral sound fiber in your family, and get off the devices. If you go to a restaurant, if it's a red flag, if you're going to a restaurant and if your family picks up the phone more than once, that's probably a problem. And I go into restaurants and I see families of 5 on them the whole time they're there. They never talk.
Yes.
Find a way to turn the TVs off. You don't have to get rid of them, but just balance. I think just balance with things and show your kids the magic of life. I don't want synthetic anything is not better than real anything. And I think that's where we've just got to get at. And I think if we get in those places, we're going to be fine. But I think we're going to have we have an incredible opportunity in the church right now to go
Let's talk
out
about that.
and to meet people. Yeah, I'm actually speaking at Christ Church in Effingham at the end of April, last Sunday in April, and on AI and Christianity. And I spoke down in Mount Vernon a few weeks ago, and just talking about, from a Christian perspective, what do we need to do, and what's going on in the world today, and what is your opportunity to go out and to have conversations with people.
So, community building.
Very much. And I think, Susan, that we're finding less and less of that. Less and less people open their homes up to have people in them for dinner. Less and less people. I had a good friend of mine wrote a letter to everyone that he sends stuff to for Christmas. And it was, if you're receiving this, thank you for sending me a Christmas card. Thank you for taking the time to handwrite this. And it was an incredibly well crafted note about the importance of things that our grandparents did that we may think are old fashioned, but a lot of that old fashioned, I think, probably needs to come back, and just sitting around and talking to people and visiting. And that's a great place for the church to begin and start at. And it doesn't always have to happen in the building. And it's not the responsibility of your ministers and your elders. It's our responsibility. And I know it's hard. I get it. The first time I spoke at a church, my wife, I grew up in metropolitan Xenia, Illinois, and my wife and I, we were a month away from being engaged, and we were coming through Xenia for Christmas to stop by my parents on Christmas morning. And we were going to go to Xenia Christian Church, and they didn't have a minister because he couldn't get in because the snow had hit. And so they said, and this is not knocking anybody, there were great people there, but they said, we're going to sing a few songs and then go home. And I thought, really? On Christ's birthday, that's all we got. And then I'm kind of sitting there thinking that to myself, and God's kind of saying, well, I'm talking to you too. And so I thought, I just kind of sheepishly raised my hand. I'm like, I can read the Christmas story if anybody wants me to. pulled my hand back down, hoping nobody'd answer. Everybody said, "Yep, you're it." And I got up, I stumbled through it. It was really my first teaching lesson. And I thought I was going to pass out on the stage, but I made it through it. And God tells us He'll provide. He just doesn't say, hey, it's going to look pretty the first time. And that's okay, because I think if you did, pride would seep in there real quick. But you look at, I'm actually reading the book of Acts right now,
We're
and I
studying
just been
Acts in our
spent,
Bible study.
well, excellent. And, I spent a lot of time thinking about these guys. They had no college education. There was no Bible school. They didn't go to Bible study. Their Bible study was walking with Christ. And I think sometimes it gets easier for us to say, I struggle over the reading. I do this and I do this. And that may all be perfectly true. And and I understand that. But I think that Satan uses that against us, where where it becomes a crutch, where we just don't want to do anything. And I am sure, Kevin, at your church and other people at other churches that might hear this, your ministerial staff would be thrilled if you'd come in and say, I'm really struggling with this. How do I get started? I am sure, without a shadow of a doubt, they'd be willing to help you. And if not, Susan, I'm sure you could point them in a direction of somebody who would. And so that's where I would tell you to kind of get started on this. And I would also understand, I guess, in the age of AI, work may change. I don't think it's going to be like it was when I was a kid, where I had pretty much the same job for 30, 34, 35 years. I think they're going to change. But if you learn how to learn, and if you've got a great work ethic, and you're hungry, humble, and smart, I think you're going to have a job.
That's wonderful. Okay, so if you were giving a charge to the church today, filled with people my age, younger, what would you say? I mean, our job is still the same, to make disciples. So in this world that we're living in now,
Well, I would go back and look at the Great Commission. And the Great Commission tells us our job is to teach and preach the gospel to all mankind, and that God will be there and He will provide, and He will share. He will make sure that we have everything that we need. Maybe not everything we want, but we will have everything that we need. And I think, with that said, you also, if you read the Great Commission, there's no ifs, or if you want tos. There's none of that. It's there. And if you also look, there's no age limit. It's no, hey, you're too young to get started, or you're too old. So kind of the way I read the Bible, and I'm a little tongue in cheek on this, but look at Methuselah. If you're not as old as Methuselah, we're out still teaching and preaching the gospel. And I haven't met anybody that is yet. So I just think that, and I also think, and my wife, I think, would tell you, Darlene's really great at this, that there's a benefit to us by being able to go out and minister. Don't go into it thinking that you're speaking to someone else, the someone else is the beneficiary of everything. You're the beneficiary as well. There's a great Kyle Idleman book, and it's just missing I'm just missing right the moment, but it was all about going out and teaching and sharing and doing things. And in those stories, whenever you read them from Kyle Idleman, you're like, oh, I think I got this. Boy, God's out there helping this, because this person is helping this other person in the Bible. And you're like, wow, that other person that got help. And it's like, nope. Kyle's like, that's not it. It's the person over here who's getting all the help. And so I think, again, being hungry, humble, and smart about things, I when I was finishing up my Bible reading for 2025, I was in the Old Testament. There's a lot in there about humility. And there's a lot in there about people who aren't humble. And that's why I bring that up a lot, because the only way we're able to do any of this stuff, the only way I've been able to do anything in my life, is with Christ being in my life. I mean, that's the only way. That's the only reason I'm in any of the conversations I'm in, the projects I work on, period, bar none. That's the only reason I'm doing it. And God will open doors for you as you go on and do things. But I think the biggest thing I try to, is as I'm helping people, stop and look and enjoy the moment, and how are you growing in this moment. And I think that if you're doing those things, you really get this reciprocal piece, and you see there's a lot of goodness happening on both sides, because God's growing you as much as He is the other person, maybe even more so. If you're shy and struggling now, go with somebody that, if you're wanting to start talking, you got an uncle at home that isn't a Christian, you want to go talk to, you're struggling with Bible reading or prayer life or whatever those things are, go talk to your minister or somebody else. If you're struggling, say, I just need some help, and you'll grow. And it's okay. Just like if we tell our young kids when they're in school, it's okay if you mess up. God's not telling you He wants you perfect. He wants you doing. And so I think that's part of the recipe for success in that venue.
Love it. Okay, so I personally am feeling so encouraged that there are Christians who God is placing and calling to these high level conversations with people who are in charge of this technology that is literally changing society in our world. Do you find a lot of fellow believers in these
Yeah,
rooms,
actually,
or
I'm
is
I'm,
it a
I'm going to
lonely
a meeting
place?
in yeah, I'm going to a meeting in a couple of weeks where one of the leading minds in the world, she's leading a 3-week Bible study on stuff, and I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're seeing today because of all of the regulations and the frameworks. I mean, she was instrumental in a lot of those. I find a lot of people like that in that space, and and I find people that are, I don't want to say they're not ashamed is not the right word. They're very strong. The right terminology is they're very strong in their faith, but they're also very loving, and they're not beating people over the head with their Bible and looking at them saying, "Hey, sinner, you're over in line two." I tell people, like everybody else, I'm a recovering sinner, and that's what we all have got to look at this like. But yeah, there are a lot of people out there, and a lot, I mean, entertainment venues, computer science venues, educational venues, medical venues. Go use the gifts that God gave you, whether that's farming, teaching, computers, whatever. Go use the gift He gave you, but don't keep it hidden in the box or in the caves like Obadiah. Go out and work with people, and help start sharing. I think your life will be so much richer for that.
So true. So true. Okay, we're running out of time. So, will your dissertation be published as a book?
Trying to figure that out right now. We'll see where I'm at. If it is, it'll probably be in a little bit different format. Mine, I spent a lot of time. They tell you this. One of the things in grad school is the best dissertation is one that's done, and because a lot of people get caught up in a lot of things, and mine went on for a while because I felt pretty confident in terms of, the last 30 some years I've been involved in the ed tech space at a lot of different levels, and so I felt more at home there. When I got into the neuroscience and the psychology side of things, I had to dig in, and so I spent a lot of time really meeting with people, immersing myself in that space. So my dissertation is a combination of the ed tech, social robots, AI powered social robots, and the impact it has on human cognition. But to try to go through and go where I was wanting to go is probably going to be another couple of years. And so what I knew needed to be done now, because I spent a lot of time working in the K-12 sector with school leaders, was trying to get some frameworks out there that school leaders can use now. So it's got both sides, the ed tech and the psychology piece in it, but this piece is more focused on the K-12 sector. I will probably at some point pull back, and I really want to do more on this synthetic relationships, and I'm really deeply intrigued by, again, this potentially being the last generation on the earth of kids that look at human relationships the way we do. And I don't say that lightly, because I see what's going on. I mean, ChatGPT alone has almost 1 billion users on it right now. It was one of the fastest diffusing technologies in the history of humanity, and people have just gravitated to it, and they're giving their lives over to it. And there's Rolling Stone had a magazine article, I think back in June or July, where people were starting to pray to it like a deity. And so there's lots going on in that space that's not safe, but I can get on my phone and I can use the Gemini app and open up my phone, up my refrigerator, turn the camera on and say, with the ingredients you see, give me 5 recipes for tonight. You know, I'm trying to connect something on my tractor to something. I'm having trouble. I can hold it in there and say, why is this PTO shaft not working? Hey, did you think of trying this? Those are really cool applications for it
Yes.
that
Yes.
I feel where I don't have to spend 4 hours doing something that I could spend 3 hours and 50 minutes on something else now.
I'm finding in the world that I'm in now that, well, this happened to me. I was working on a project and it was hard. I was having, I was trying to synthesize some things and do some writing. And I was so discouraged. And I went to chat and I said, I'm really discouraged. And oh my goodness, it wrote me out this big, long, blah, 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 flowery thing. And as soon as I did it, I thought, Susan, you have Holy Spirit and you went to a soulless, whatever it is. So I think we're going to have to fight that as believers.
Oh, you have no idea. I can create, I did this and I do this for some places. I can create a synthetic human that quick. I had one at one of the Bible studies or Bible or churches I spoke at where I showed it and I said, this is very easily how somebody could get attached. We used a synthetic avatar, young, attractive, 35-year-old lady, typed in all the message in the chat GPT, gave it over to this other AI. It created a voice for her, looks you dead in the eye and just talks to you like you're real. And I can see people attaching to those left and right. And then I had on the good side, I was in an educational setting where somebody said, well, could you create one that would be of an Alzheimer's patient because we're practicing patient care. So I created a 70-year-old African American female that had Alzheimer's. And the students, when they came in, started talking and they kind of had their patient chart. And they said, well, hey, how's your daughter doing? And this patient had already forgotten she had a daughter. And anxiety went up off the scale. And the students are like, I don't know what to do. Well, in life, you can't hit the pause button. Here you can. And so we hit the pause button and said, okay, as a class, what would you do? And so they were able to think and discuss it and come back with some interventions for the student to try. And sure enough, they walked the avatar right back down. That's a great practice for patient care and different things. So
Yes.
it's not right now, as of right now, as far as I know, it's not the technology that's misusing, although that may change shortly. But right now it's us. And so we're the ones that have got to make the decisions on it. So I just
Yes.
think there's positives and negatives, and I'm going to focus on the positive and deal with the negatives. That's what I'm going to try to do.
Focus on the positive, deal with the negatives, be informed.
Yes.
So good. Okay, our time is up. I know you're busy. You need to go. But I forgot to ask you this. I forget every time. But would you pray for our listeners?
Yeah. Would you like me to do it now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for the opportunities to always to share about your word and your will. I thank you for people like Susan that's working diligently, dear Lord, to create platforms where Christians can talk and share and that others can be lifted up and inspired. I'd ask you to be with all those people who are out there that you might just fill them, dear Lord, with your spirit. I know some of them are dealing with a lot of different issues right now. Help them to feel your firm hand upon their shoulders. I'd also ask, dear Lord, that you just give them the strength and the faith that they need to do your work out into the community. What a blessing it is we get the opportunity to do that. And I'd also ask, dear Lord, as we hear um, things that be a little bit scary or different, that we know that these are all under your control, dear Lord, and that there's been a lot of scary since the Garden of Eden, and but there's also tremendous hope through your Son. And I just ask that you'd help us not to be like Obadiah, not being judgmental, because I've done that myself, where I've hidden your word in my heart. But I'd ask you to help us, Father, to find ways to share it, to help other people feel valued, and that we would just help to elevate them as you've elevated us. And it's these things we ask in your Son's name. Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fatheree.
Thank you. It's just Joe, but thank you very much.
Okay. See you guys next time.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Clean Heart Club podcast. I hope that you were blessed and learned some things that will help you on your journey. Let's remember this truth from Psalm 28:7. The Lord is my strength and shield. I trust him with all my heart. He helps me, and my heart is filled with joy. I burst out in songs of thanksgiving. Did you know I wrote a course for you? It's called the Clean Heart Club and contains 10 video teachings about some of my favorite life coaching concepts, which are so helpful. You're also invited to come join the fun in the Clean Heart Club group on Facebook and sign up to receive my weekly newsletter of encouragement. Let's be friends. See you next time.